When you get excited about baseball, what is it that you think of? The green grass and the blue sky, the crack of the bat and the pop of the mitt, the taste of a ballpark hot dog mixed with the ambient chattering of the crowd in the fifth inning. For me, it's the radio broadcasts. I've spent my entire life living in Michigan, and the one thing I look forward to every single year are summer drives listening to Dan Dickerson call a Tigers game. Something about it just feels cozy. And in listening to a game the other day, I got to thinking about how much radio and television broadcasters have driven a deep love for the sport for decades. For us Tigers fans, that man was Ernie Harwell. For 42 seasons, Ernie shared his love of baseball with the Midwest, with catchphrases such as,
"There's a breaking ball in for a strike, and he stood there like the house by the side of the road and watched it go by. Struck him out.
and
Two for the price of one for the Tigers."
his southern drawl brought comfort and joy to baseball fans everywhere. Welcome back to The Bad Baseball Fan. Let's have a talk about my favorite broadcaster of all time. William Ernest Harwell, better known as Ernie, was born on January 25, 1918, in Washington, Georgia. Growing up in Atlanta, Ernie was always a diehard baseball fan, especially for his hometown AA Atlanta Crackers. When he was 16 years old, he managed to get a job writing about baseball for the Sporting News. Attending Emory University after high school, Ernie also worked part-time for the Atlanta Constitution. Towards the end of his time at school, he got his first shot at being a radio personality for WSB Radio, hosting a twice-nightly 15-minute sports program. Around this time, he met and married his lifelong love, Lulu. In his mid-20s, after graduating and gathering a fair amount of professional experience, he was hired to announce Cracker baseball games for WSB Radio. WSB had a reach across most of the Atlantic coast, and Ernie was able to garner a name for himself. Unfortunately, World War II was about, and Ernie enlisted in the Marines in 1942. While working as a correspondent in the service, he was brought back to Atlanta to do the play-by-play for a handful of Cracker games. Some felt that a serviceman working in a civilian position was immoral, and Ernie's time as a radio broadcaster quickly came to an end. Luckily, Earl Mann, who had brought Ernie in for the play-by-play, promised him a job when his service was over. True to his word, upon discharge from the Marines in 1946, Ernie returned to Atlanta as the full-time radio broadcaster for the Atlanta Crackers. His work over the next few seasons led Branch Rickey of the at-the-time Brooklyn Dodgers to trade catcher Cliff Dapper to the Crackers in exchange for Ernie's services. This was pretty cool because it's the only instance in baseball history in which a player was traded for a broadcaster. In early of August 1948, Ernie Harwell became a full-time broadcaster for a Major League Baseball team. He spent 2 seasons in Brooklyn before moving across town to work for the Giants. Now stationed at the Polo Grounds, Ernie had the blessing of being the man to call the national television broadcast of the pennant-deciding playoff game between the Dodgers and the Giants in 1951. The fact that he worked this game has almost been lost to time, given his radio counterpart Russ Hodges' mythic call. You know the one. Ernie worked with the Giants through 1953, when he moved on to Baltimore to cover Orioles games. His time in Baltimore was riddled with awful baseball teams, but it was in Baltimore that he continued to develop his broadcasting skills and prepare to make the last jump of his career. In 1960, Ernie was brought to Detroit to call Tigers games on both the radio and television. His partner in the booth for his first 4 seasons was George Kell, who played with the Orioles when Harwell worked in Baltimore. Kell, who while injured, worked a few games in the booth with Ernie in Baltimore, was instrumental in bringing him to Detroit. Harwell and Kell both shared radio and television broadcast duties for Ernie's first few years in Detroit, before he moved exclusively to radio broadcasting in 1965. He had the pleasure of working the 1968 World Series on NBC Radio with Hall of Famer Pee Wee Reese as the Tigers and 30-game winner Denny McLain beat the St. Louis Cardinals and Bob Gibson, who had just had arguably the most dominant pitching season in baseball history. His longest professional relationship began in 1973 with Paul Carey. The pair would call Tiger games on the radio together for 19 seasons. This even included another Tigers World Championship in 1984, led by hometown hero Kirk Gibson. In August of 1981, Ernie was awarded the Ford Frick Award by the National Baseball Hall of Fame. He was the first living broadcaster to win the award, let alone being the first active one to do it. In 1990, while trying to negotiate a contract extension, he was told by team president Bo Schembechler that he would not be welcomed back following the 1991 season. The public responded with outrage, and both the team's and radio station WJR's responses were uncoordinated and messy at best. Harwell, ever the graceful man, chose to move on quietly and work a bit for both the California Angels and on CBS Radio's Game of the Week. His partner of 19 years, Paul Carey, retired from broadcasting following the 1991 season. Going into 1993, Tigers ownership changed hands to Little Caesars founder Mike Ilitch. Ilitch made it a mission of the Tigers organization to bring Ernie back for one more season. One season turned into another 10, with Ernie broadcasting games both on television and the radio. He resumed his full-time radio work in 1999, the last season at Tiger Stadium, and following the 2002 season, he announced his retirement from broadcasting. He continued to make guest appearances for the Tigers, calling an inning here or there, his presence always bringing nostalgia and comfort. In 2010, at the age of 92, and with his wife Lulu beside him, Ernie passed away. Ever the humble man, I fear he never truly realized what he meant to Tigers fans. He always seemed to diminish his role in the game, while glorifying baseball with an almost Shakespearean prose. I have such vivid memories of his voice from my early childhood, a voice that, to me, is the voice of baseball. For that, Ernie, all I can say is thank you. I'll leave you with Ernie's words as he signed off for the last time as a Tigers radio broadcaster.
The Tigers have just finished their 2002 season, and I've just finished my baseball broadcasting career. And it's time to say goodbye, but I think goodbyes are sad, and I'd much rather say hello. Hello to a new adventure. I'm not leaving, folks. I'll still be with you, living my life in Michigan, my home state, surrounded by family and friends. And rather than goodbye, please allow me to say thank you. Thank you for letting me be part of your family. Thank you for taking me with you to that cottage up north, to the beach, the picnic, your workplace, and your backyard. Thank you for sneaking your transistor under the pillow as you grew up loving the Tigers. Now, I might have been a small part of your life, but you've been a very large part of mine, and it's my privilege and honor to share with you the greatest game of all. Now, God has a new adventure for me, and I'm ready to move on. So I leave you with a deep sense of appreciation for your long-time loyalty and support. I thank you very much, and God bless all of you.